Hi, I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to FinextraTV's Thought Leadership Series. Kindly calling in today to speak with us is the CEO of Banking Circle, Anders Cour. Hi Anders, it's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and thanks for dialing me in.
No problem at all. Now, today we're going to be talking about the influence of COVID on financial institutions' ability to deliver their services. But before we do, I think it's worth noting that banks and financial institutions were busy changing their business practices, culture, and the technology long before the pandemic. So let's start there and sort of set the scene for us. Could you tell us what were they building up to, and then maybe a bit about how COVID might have accelerated those areas of the industry?
Yes, I think what we've seen over the last probably 15 years has been the fact that banks are well aware that they have to be increasingly digital to compete in a modern world. And that journey actually started a while ago. They obviously, especially many of the larger banks, come with technology legacy, which they're well aware of. And I think, as you said, their COVID just accelerated that trend. So in or at least from my perspective, you would see many of the banks increasingly adding more resources to the digital journey and to the digital customer experience, while then partnering with third-party vendors in terms of things or solutions that are outside their domestic core. You could say in a recent white paper, we saw that actually a lot of banks already have third-party providers on. I think up to 74% of commercial banks and 80% of retail banks actually are already working with third-party providers in different aspects of the business. So I think to recapture that one, the trend is well underway, and it will be further accelerated, I think, by the pandemic.
But of course, this isn't the first financial crisis we've witnessed, is it? What lessons do you think that we learnt from before, and do you think these can be applied to the situation we find ourselves in today? And if so, what ways can businesses future-proof themselves?
I think it's always worth looking at previous crises. I think you learn something from these crises, and then you try to adapt to it, and then the new crises come, and it's always slightly different to what you saw last time. So while you can adhere some of the learnings you had, some of others are new. And I think when you look into banks and how they work, again, the challenge that they face to, at least in my opinion, is digitization, legacy on the technology side, and increased regulatory burdens. And COVID or not, that's here. And I think that's part of what they will have to really focus even more on over the next couple of years. I think especially what we have seen from our side is that 6-7 years ago, banks were much more reluctant to partner with other businesses, but wanted to do everything themselves. While what we've actually seen is that, again, they focus on where they really need to focus, like the digital customer experience, their own core domestic markets, and then they tend to use other providers outside of these domestic markets. And I think that shift in mindset that we've seen over the last, is it 2 years, or maybe only 12 months, that I think will be instrumental for the banks to move forward and be relevant also in 10, 15 years.
Of course, yeah. And sure, it goes without saying that institutions were, and always have done, prioritized delivering best solutions to their customers. But what I'd like to learn from you is maybe some of the challenges they're facing today and what they need to do to remain a competitive market player. And can you tell us and run us through the importance of financial infrastructure?
Yes, I think first and foremost for anyone today, irrespective of industry, I think everyone is looking to develop, you could say, a digital first relationship at scale with their clients. And I think it's important that you do digital first, and it's important you end up getting scale, because that's two major components in this one. While doing so, depending on your size, obviously as an incumbent in the financial space, if you're a global top 10 bank, you can probably do both. If you are a large regional bank or even a smaller regional bank, like in my opinion, I would do if I was running a business in that size, I would do whatever I could to develop this digital first relationship, and then partner with someone who could do whatever I would see as something that would be commoditized over time. For example, the financial infrastructure. So in my opinion, we would see a commoditization of financial infrastructure. That's the one we're trying to lead at Banking Circle. And that's why I think that while focusing on your unique skills within your core market as a bank, and then not doing whatever both requires financial infrastructure scale and will be commoditized over time, makes a lot of sense.
Well, staying on the subject of partnerships, long before the pandemic, when the borders weren't closed and we were flying to industry events, we kept on hearing the importance of collaboration to compete. Do you think that message is even more prevalent today? And could you run us through the strengths of both banks and fintechs?
Yes, I think if you look at the latter question first, the strengths of the banks versus the fintechs, I think to me, we said previously that banks typically have technological legacy. I think the positive flip side of that coin, if you could call it that, is that banks also have history. And history matters if you're a financial institution. If you're a large player and you want to deposit large volumes of funds, you would typically look into how old is the incumbent, how is the balance sheet, and that kind of stuff. And that's why I think the banks should really utilize the fact that they have history and they have balance sheet. So while they should obviously take advantage of that, then on the other side, you get the fintech players, where the fintech players can be agile, they can be narrow and deep. And in any given aspects, these two types of incumbents are actually very well suited to partner. So getting into your first question here, I think the partnership between fintechs and banks, or between banks and open banking data players, to take that as part of the fintech group as well, we'll see that accelerating over the next couple of years. I truly believe that.
No, it's really interesting, and taking all of that into account, I hope we get a chance to catch up further down the line and reflect on all of that. But for now, Anders, thank you so much for calling in and giving us your insights. It's been really useful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.